All right. So we're continuing our adventures with Sri Ramakrishna, with Thakur, or Tucker, as my friend Bill used to call him. And we are on chapter 35. We're just starting the chapter, page 677. And this is Ramakrishna at the Star Theater, which is where the Girish Ghosh put on all of his shows. And I think it was his theater, actually. And so he's gotten another invitation there, and Ramakrishna has gone to the theater. And all right. Sunday, December 14th, 1884. Sri Ramakrishna arrived at the Star Theatre on Beaton Street in Calcutta to see a play about the life of Prahlada. M. Baburam, Narayan, and other devotees were with him. The hall was brightly lighted. The play had not yet begun. The master was seated in a box talking with Girish. Master smiling. Ah, you've written such nice plays. Girish, but sir, how little I assimilate. I just write. Master, no, you assimilate a great deal. The other day I said to you that no one could sketch a divine character unless he had love of God in his heart. Yes, one needs to assimilate spiritual ideas, right? You know what that means? Assimilate means they have to become part and parcel of you, right? They can't, quite often we have our religion as part of our mind, right? It's kind of off there. But to digest it, it's like, assimilating is what, when you eat a carrot, right? Then the body assimilates it. It takes that carrot apart all the way down to the molecules and then reconstructs it, puts it back together in a way that's useful in the body and mind for that matter. And so when we read these things, this is why my favorite type of reading is when you have a book like the I Am That book, or like the Bhagavatam is also like that, or the Gita is also like that, where there's just so much there that you just read a very small amount. You never, well, it depends on the book. Some books you can read them like a regular book and it works just fine. But like the gospel, usually scripture, some at least some scriptures, uh, it's best to read just a very little bit. And then the method that I've used that works really well for me is to read just that little bit, sit back and in your own mind, summarize it. Put it in your own words. What did that paragraph that I just read say, right? And then so you run it through your mind and see if you can repeat it, and then you go back and read it again to make sure that you didn't leave out any parts of it, right? And then you come back again and sit and just run it through your head again a third time on your own without reading it, and then just sit quietly and kind of ponder it. Allow it to drip like you're a coffee maker and you're giving it time to sort of drip, to brew within you, right? And then when you feel like you've gotten what you need or you feel like you've understood it, then you go and read another small amount, right? And that way it sticks with you and that way it becomes part of you because we have to move it out of the head and bring it all the way down into the heart, as it were, so that it affects us, right? So that when we're in situations where that teaching is appropriate, it comes to mind, it comes up for us, and we can say, and that's kind of this whole process of reading here. As I read this, whenever I kind of wander off into the world of, commentary, it's really just remembering things that I've read that are related to what we're reading now, and just kind of flesh out the meaning and tie the strings of relationship between all these different other spiritual truths that are stored in the mind, right? So that it becomes something that you can pull up within yourself. So that when you're sitting there on the bus with your head against the window, just kind of staring out, bored, you can have run a scripture through your head that you've read, or an idea, a spiritual idea that you're nursing at the moment that you're trying to understand a little bit more, right? These teachings, like my favorite one, of course, I always say is you're not the doer, because Ramakrishna repeats it so many times, even to beginners, and so it's a proper piece of information for all of us to have. And the mind tricks us because we understand the words, you are not the doer, very simple to understand. but how in the world can that be true, right? And how can we say that we believe it when we can't at all say that it's true, right? We can say that it's true because we believe the things that some Thakur says is true, but that doesn't mean anything, you know? We have to find out what does it mean and how in the world do we get into a place where we can see that, where we can know that, right? So that it's obvious to us, right? Because Thakur, because he said it so many times and because he said it to people, to all kinds of different audiences when he's talking, it's an important teaching, even for us, you know, at the beginning. And when I say the beginning, I mean all spiritual seeking is at the beginning for about 99% of the time. And then you're advanced for like 1% of the time, and then you're done. So yeah, so they're talking about this idea of assimilation. Of course, Girish, he's just being modest, I think, in front of Thakur there. But Thakur saw great things in him, and I think it's because of this, because of the fact that he wrote these wonderfully spiritual plays, and to write about and to create a story about and a script about a divine character. Uh, you can't do that without absorbing some of that character or some understanding, so knowing what that character would say or how that character would react or how that character would be, right? And one
But it's
can't do that. Huh?
Swamiji, Girish, knowing his personality, it's strange that he used to read all these. I mean, he knew about Prahlad Maharaj and he could assimilate the divine, like Thakur said. I mean, there's a big. I mean, it's a contrast to his character, right? What I know of, at least. Maybe I haven't read the whole thing.
Well, I don't think it's any more of a contrast to his character than it is to any of our characters. We're all
Yeah,
pretty.
but I'm not writing about divine characters because I know I'm not capable.
Oh, but
So
you could. I think you could, Gita. But yeah, yes, it's in contrast with his life, but I think it was at the core of himself. The external Girish, the Bohemian Girish, that was just a shell, and most people can't see past the shells. They don't look in, and that's why Ramakrishna scolded the devotees because there was a time Girish showed up drunk. Several times he showed up drunk to see Ramakrishna, and I mean, it's one of my favorite interactions in the whole world is anytime Ramakrishna and Girish are together. I'm fascinated because Ramakrishna treated him so utterly different than a religious person would expect. He always treated Girish with respect, never told him to stop drinking. My one of my favorite scenes is in if you it's on YouTube. I can't remember the title of it, but there was a wonderful play about Ramakrishna on YouTube, an old one done way back in the 60s or 50s even maybe. It's in black and white, and it is such a wonderful little life of Ramakrishna. I think we watched it at this last retreat, but in there's this wonderful scene where Girish comes to Ramakrishna and says to him, I'm the king of intoxication. I have mastered intoxication in my life. I've been in search of it. And he said, I thought I had reached the pinnacle of it until I met you. And I see you in these intoxications where you're completely devoid of a body. He says, I want that intoxication. That's the intoxication I'm looking for. And Ramakrishna smiles and said, yes, come, I can show it to you. I can give it to you. And Girish very, gets excited for a moment. Then he pauses and he's like, do I have to stop drinking? And Ramakrishna says to him, no, no, that's just an external thing. Mother will remove that when she's ready, right? It's like, so it's not, so Ramakrishna wouldn't let him make his vice the point. Ramakrishna says, no, don't, don't bother yourself with that. Give that to mother, you know, and you think of God, you do what I tell you here, and you will find your intoxication. And he really meant it, because even that one time where Girish forgot his bottle of wine in the cab, he came to see Ramakrishna and he stumbles in to see Ramakrishna, and Ramakrishna greets him, and then Ramakrishna notices that he doesn't have a bottle of wine in his hand. And so he reaches over to a brahmachari, to a young to a young spiritual seeker next to him, and he says, "Go out to the cab and see if Girish forgot his bottle. He's going to want it later." And so he runs out to catch the cab before it leaves, and sure enough, the bottle's in the back of the cab. So he takes it and brings it in, and Ramakrishna gives the bottle to Girish. And so, I mean, that is really that's how you assimilate. You take a thing like that, and you're like, "What?" How? Huh? What do you mean he doesn't have to stop drinking? What do you mean mother removes that when she's ready? What does that mean? It's just an external thing, right? It's like that's what it is to assimilate. It's like to read a story like that and not just let it brush over the top of your head and think cool and keep reading. Stop. Look at how amazing that is. Open your heart to it and see if you can find out how does Tagore think? That someone that because Girish was even abusive toward him, at times when he came to visit. And Ramakrishna would always had a place for Girish, and when the devotees revolted at one point and said, "Why do you let that rascal come here? Why do why? How, he's not spiritual, is he? I mean, look at him." And Ramakrishna scolds them. He tells them, "Be quiet, shut up," is what he tells them. He says, "You cannot see anything that I can see in that man." Right?
That's amazing. Amazing.
It is amazing. And it's amazing because it without any meanness or sternness or strictness or anger or finger pointing, that man became a monk under the love of Krishna.
No preconditions. Wow.
Yes, this is the thing. Go forward. It's the most beautiful teaching ever, and it's Ramakrishna's constant teaching to us. Yeah, you are where you are. That's not the point. Don't make it the point. Go forward. That's the point, right? Go forward. Gather your skirt together and get up and go. Don't lament conditions and circumstances because they always change and will always change.
Thank you so much.
So the master, you've written such nice plays, Girish, but sir, how little I assimilate it. I just write. Master, no, you assimilate a great deal. The other day I said to you that no one could sketch a divine character unless he had love of God in his heart. Yes, one needs to assimilate spiritual ideas. I went to Keshav's house to see the play Nava Vrindavan. I saw a deputy magistrate there who earned 800 rupees a month. Everyone said that he was a very learned man, but I found him restless because of a boy, his son. He was very anxious to find a good seat for the boy. He paid no attention to the spiritual conversation of the players. The boy was pestering him with questions. "Father, what is this? What is that?" And he was extremely busy with that boy. You see, he merely read books, but he didn't assimilate their ideas. Right? And so we see we look back at that and we think, well, how does he say that he doesn't assimilate those ideas? What he just told us would indicate that? It's like, well, he was restless, right? He wasn't still. And he was preoccupied with the happenings around him, right? This just restless, trying to find the best place for his son, and then sitting there and answering all the boys' questions during the play rather than listening and taking it in and like that. And so that would be indicate that is the sign of not assimilating these teachings, is that you have a restless mind. You don't have a silent, you're not finding a silent center, and you're preoccupied with life. You've got every so many plates spinning in the air, and you're like, oh, this and doing this and running there and getting that and making this and da 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 da. Right? Making sure that that mind never falls into the silence of self because it hurts too much if you haven't done any work in there. Right? And so this is why it's important. These books, they're books, but some of them are companions. And just like people, some people are just people, but there's some that become companions because we really they connect with us, right? And so that's what we want to do. We want to find the scriptures. Yaela, good to see you. How it seems like a long time. My goodness, what a
Hi,
wonderful.
Swamiji. Yeah, it's been a long time. I was traveling and then I was sick. So, yeah.
I'm so sorry.
Well,
Well,
I'm glad to
wonderful.
be back and I'm glad to
Yes,
um, hear you talking. And that's really inspiring. Thank you.
yes. Well, very good to see you. I truly, my heart jumped there for
Welcome
a moment.
back.
Thank
Welcome
you.
Yes,
back.
Thanks a lot.
excellent. All right. Yeah, so he was restless and he paid no attention to the spiritual conversation, right? So he wasn't interested in the life of our Prahlada there. He wasn't paying attention to the spiritual truths, to the teachings. He was paying attention to the story and the theater and his son, like that. And so when we read these things, we want to go in and look at what they're saying. So when Thakur says that he didn't assimilate their ideas, he merely reads books. And then you got to look back and say, well, how can he say that? Uh, You know, what happens if you don't assimilate? And you do that, and then you always then use that as a mirror for yourself. Am I restless? Am I overly concerned with activities around me? Do I have a spiritual center? Do I have a place that I can take refuge in myself? Have I found that place? Have I nurtured that place in myself yet? Girish. I often ask myself, why bother about the theater anymore? Right? So he's thinking, gosh, well, maybe I should be more spiritual. Maybe I should stop writing plays and running a theater and doing all of that. And we all have those thoughts sometimes, right? It's like, oh, maybe I should, quit my job and go on permanent retreat somewhere. And Ramakrishna says, no, no, let things be as they are. See, very important teaching right there. Don't let ego make your decisions. Let things be as they are, right? People will learn much from your plays. The performance began, and Prahlada was entering the schoolroom as a student. At the sight of him, Sri Ramakrishna uttered once or twice the word Prahlada and then went into samadhi, right? That's, God, what a lucky guy. Just such simple things. This is also a sign of assimilation because Thakur he could look at anything and it would remind him of God some way, right? I remember one old man was walking with a stick, a walking stick, and Ramakrishna came to note the walking stick was made out of the same wood that Krishna's flute was made out of. And just that association, suddenly Ramakrishna is off in samadhi again. The time he saw that English boy, a well-dressed English boy, leaning against a tree, but he was leaning against this tree with his, leg crossing the other leg, like Krishna stands in his when you see him in a statue. And instantly, Ramakrishna, boom, back into samadhi again. Just constantly, his mind was so full and so just saturated with this divine world, this divine knowledge, this divine being that everything, even mundane little things, would place his mind into a spiritual flight, a soaring. And so that is what we look like when we've assimilated all of this, when we've made all of this part of us. We're just constantly going off into samadhi, constantly thinking of God and finding this blissful joy because it reminds us again, and that's all it takes for the mind to fly back to its center, to taste that bliss or to be reminded of that bliss, right? And sure enough, you're off and running. During another scene, Ramakrishna wept to see Prahlada under the elephant's feet. He cried when the boy was thrown into the fire. The scene changed. Lakshmi and Narayana were seen seated in Goloka. Narayana was worried about Prahlada. This scene too threw Sri Ramakrishna into an ecstatic mood, right? So he's not seeing a whole lot of the play. He's in samadhi for much of it here. But again, you see how Ramakrishna here he's demonstrating that attachment is proper sometimes, right? Why do I say that? Because he's watching a play and he's weeping about the story of Prahlada. When he gets stepped on by an elephant, I guess. I don't know the story of Prahlada, but he gets stepped on by an elephant, gets tossed into a fire, apparently. And Ramakrishna's just watching the play, and we would sometimes in our spiritual selves would think, oh, well, he will be unaffected by it because he'll sit there discerning the whole time that, it's just a play, it's not real, blah, blah, blah. But no, he goes to the play, he weeps, he laughs, he engages his heart. That's attachment. But see, when the play's over, boom, that's detachment. He's finished. He's not weeping anymore. He's not disturbed by it. He doesn't carry it with him. So it's a great example of what it is to have your powers of attachment match your powers of detachment, right? Because we sometimes get the wrong idea. And I've said this before, but I've said everything before, I guess. But that sorry. Anyway, so that Vivekananda makes a point one time, and I was so relieved to find it when I did, where he says that detachment is not the ideal, right? We talk about detachment all the time, not because it's the ideal. We talk about it all the time because it's the hard part. Attachment is easy, so we don't need to be taught how to attach. But how to detach is more difficult for us. And so that's why the scriptures are always detachment, 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 right? But he says that's not the ideal. The ideal is to grow your power of attachment to match your power of attachment so that you can be with somebody who's hurting and you can attach to them, right? That's how love is expressed. That's how empathy happens. You can attach to them so that you can be fully with them, so that you can be a companion to them, a comfort to them, a strength to them, right? And share in whatever it is that they're struggling through. But then when it's time to go, you can just as easily withdraw that attachment, and be back fully within yourself and not be split in your mind when you leave their company. Right. So it's a great example. So here we see it being shown in this play that he's going and enjoying it and really watching it and getting engrossed in it and becoming emotional about it. After the performance, Girish conducted Sri Ramakrishna to his private room in the theater. He said to the master, "Would you care to see the farce Vivaha Vibrata, the confusion of marriage?" Master, no! Why, something like that after the life of Prahlada? I once said to the leader of a theatrical troupe, end your performance with some religious talk. We've been listening to such wonderful spiritual conversation, and now we see the confusion of marriage? A worldly topic? We should become our old selves again. We should return to our old mood. Girish, well, how did you like the performance? Right? So he wanted that. It's the same thing as why at the end of the day, we should always end the day with a spiritual thought, a spiritual scripture. After the curtain comes down on your day and you're finished, you're laying there in bed. The last thought of your day should always be a spiritual thought, whether it's just sitting there laying with Thakur and kind of reminiscing about the day in his presence, or contemplating it, or, just chanting something or reading a poem. Just something that you have to put your mind at ease, at rest, kind of in mother's lap as you go to sleep for the night. Girish, so how did you like the performance, Master? I found that it was God himself who was acting the different parts. Those who played the female part seemed to me the direct embodiments of the blissful mother, and the cowherd boys of Golika, the embodiment of Narayana himself. It was God alone who became all of these. There are signs by which you can know whether a man has truly seen God. One of these is joy. There's no hesitancy in him. He's like the ocean, the waves and the sounds are on the surface. Below is a profound depth. The man who has seen God behaves sometimes like a madman, sometimes like a ghoul, without any feeling of purity or impurity, sometimes like an inert thing, remaining speechless because he sees God within and without, sometimes like a child without any attachment, wandering around unconcernedly with his cloth under his arm, rather instead of around his waist. So he's talking about those times where he's just intoxicated with God and his clothes fall off, his dhoti falls off. He doesn't care at all. Sometimes doesn't even notice. Right? That's pure. That's wonderful. That's a person who has completely transcended body mind. And just the joy that just the joy that he had from that, you know. Let's put a prayer up there, Mother. I don't think I'm ready for that. That would really change these videos. With a cloth under his arm. Again, in the mood of a child, he acts in different ways. Sometimes like a boy, indulging in frivolity. Sometimes like a young man, working and teaching with the strength of a lion. Right? It's important to realize this because, we have an idea of what it is to be spiritual, but being spiritual isn't a stamped out thing where everybody who's spiritual is going to be the same way. Right? He's saying you've got these different possibilities here. They're a madman, right? Because they don't have any rules. They're absolutely free. Love is their only rule. And so they don't have any responsibility to social conventions. Right? They don't have to play with the social conventions. They don't have to be polite. They don't have to be, friendly. They don't have to be any of those things. They can be as they are. And we've seen swamis like that. You see swamis like that. You're like, is he sane? Right? It's just they're so free to be like a child, just innocent. Everything, his anger is like a line on the water, not really drawn into it. He acts in many different ways, sometimes like a boy indulging in frivolity, sometimes like a young man working and teaching with the strength of a lion. Man cannot see God on account of his ego. Right? It's our ego that prevents us from being free like a child. Right? And when you go inside and discern, when you go inside and begin observing, right, which is what we're supposed to be doing all the time, is observing our mind. When you go inside, you can see those things. You can see that when you walk past somebody who's suffering, you can feel in your heart that suffering. It's there, right? And then the impetus to alleviate that suffering comes, and the ego shuts it down, right? Oh, I don't have time right now. Oh, I've already gave money, Oh, I don't think I have anything on me. You just keep walking, right? That's egoism. That stops you from alleviating suffering because that's your nature to alleviate suffering. You see somebody having a wonderful time together, and your first impetus is to laugh along with them and become part of the conversation. But the ego squashes it down. No, you don't know them. What will they think of you? They might be mad at you for paying attention to them, or something. And you see how the ego is always just coming in, just raining on the party. Your life could be so much fun. You could have been friends with everybody on the bus by the time you got to work, but the ego wouldn't even let you talk to the person sitting next to you. All right, this is the freedom of heart, the freedom of love, the freedom of knowing our nature, that we're not this body, we're not this mind. All of this is the play, and we are intimate with everyone because God has become every single person here, just like he said about the play, that God is the only being. There is no such thing as a person. So talk to God on the bus, in everyone, right? Not just in your prayers. Make every conversation with stranger a prayer, right? And talk to them as if you're talking to the divine beloved, because you are talking to the divine beloved, right? So man cannot see God on account of his ego. You cannot see the sun when the cloud rises in the sky, but that doesn't mean that there is no sun. The sun is there just the same. This is what I'm always trying to emphasize. This is so important in spiritual life because we get this crazy idea that God leaves us or that God pulls away from us or God, goes away from us and we go looking for God. It's why Ram Vivekananda says, stop seeking him, see him. God cannot leave you. It's you that has left him. It is you that has turned your attention to other things in yourself. God is always with you and always welcoming when you place your attention on him. Always glad to have you, right? He's never thinking, "Oh, you're so dirty, go fix yourself first." No, absolutely not. Right? Absolutely not. God accepts you exactly where you're at, is nothing but joyful that you're there, and sees nothing but your divinity when he looks at you. Right? Sees nothing but that. And all he wants you to do is go forward. Be happy and go forward. This is a long journey, perhaps, but you just go forward. You'll get there in time. But there is no harm in the ego of a child. On the contrary, this ego is helpful. Greens are bad for the stomach, but hinche is good. So hinche cannot properly be called greens. Sugar candy likewise cannot be classed with other sweets. Other sweets are injurious to the health, but not sugar candy. All right. That might raise different opinions, but this idea. So the ego of a child, so the child knows himself separate and apart, or sees himself separate and apart, but a child will play with a stranger, a child will run outside in his diaper and not care, a child will play with anyone. When a child gets angry, it only lasts a moment and then he's over it. Right. So this is what it is. He may be selfish for a moment, but the next moment he's forcing you to take the ball again. So it's like that. He's not locked in his ego. He's not stuck in his ego. The ego's there, right? And it's making him still feel separate, but he's not defining himself by it. He's free in spite of it. So I said to Keshab, if I tell you more than I have already said, you won't be able to keep your organization together. Well, that frightened him. Then I said to him, there is no harm in the ego of a child or the ego of a servant. Right? So this is Ramakrishna's very unique teaching. Most of us are always thinking we have to completely efface ourselves of ego. Ramakrishna says, well, normal people, ordinary folks like you and me, are not likely to be able to do that. It's a pretty tall order. So he says, do the best you can. Get that ego as thin as you can. And then whatever's left of your ego, put it in relationship to God. Make it a servant of God, make it a lover of God, make it the child of God, make it the hero of God. All these different relationships that we can have with God. Put what's left of your ego in relationship with the beloved. And that way you can escape the damage that an unripe ego can do. Right? So you ripen your ego. You get it to a place where it knows that it's not the body. It knows that you're not the mind. It knows that you're spirit. It may not know the oneness of with everything, but it has a sense of that. Right? So and I get that from that story where Ramakrishna likens a ripe ego to a ripe coconut. And he says, when a coconut's green, you can shake it and you can't hear the disparate parts in there. It seems like just a coconut, just a one thing. But when it's dried and it's ripened and the husk has taken off, then you shake it, and the innards have pulled away from the sides of the coconut, right? And you can hear it rattle in there, so you can know that there's the husk, and then there's the shell, and then inside that is the actual coconut, shaking around in there. And so he says a ripe ego is like that. And so what does that mean? That means that when we go into our inner world, initially it's just one thing. You close your eyes, you just see a red, mushy world. What's in here? Nothing's in here. Can't see nothing. Right? But you spend time in there and you begin to realize that you're just paying attention to your sight because you're so accustomed to being in your senses. Right? But you step away from your senses inside and you become to know. You come to start to dry out, as it were, inside. You start to observe. Wow, look at this. I watch my body. My body talks to me just like the world talks to me. There's no difference. There's no boundary of body. I still interact with my body using the senses, just like I interact with the rest of the world using my senses. And you start thinking about that, and it's, well, then why do I see my body so different? It talks to me and communicates to me in exactly the same way as the rest of the world. And so we extend the idea of our body to include the whole world, the whole universe, right? It leads us to oneness. This is ripening the ego, knowing yourself, knowing how you're put together, knowing how this mind works, knowing how this body works, how the body and the mind, what's their relationship, right? So that's what it is to put the ego in relationship to God and to let it ripen, right? He who has seen God finds that God alone has become the world and all of its living beings. It is he who has become all. Such a person is called a superior devotee. Girish smiling. Yes, God is everything. But the devotee keeps a trace of ego. That is not harmful. Master also smiling. Yes, there is no harm in that, Girish. Right? Sweet words to Girish. Girish's joy in there. You can almost see it. Yes, God is everything. He sees that. He knows that God is in his intoxication. He has a very different relationship with the divine, but it's very personal and very close. We know that just because of, by the fact that he went to see Ramakrishna when he was drunk. Where do most drunkards go when they're drunk? They don't go to church. They don't go to the temple. But Girish did. Girish smiling, yes, God is everything, but the devotee keeps a trace of ego. That's not harmful, right? He's just repeating it. He's assimilating it inside. You can almost feel it in it as you read those words. Master smiling, yes, there is no harm in that, Girish. And the master smiling, so they're smiling at each other right now. So this is a moment. Girish and Ramakrishna are having a moment, here. And Girish is and it's just very sweet. Yes, there's no harm in that, Girish. The trace of ego is kept in order to enjoy God. Right? Enjoy God. So he gives him a little tilt in the right direction. He says, your ego's there, not to enjoy the intoxication of your wine, but your ego is there to let you enjoy the intoxication of God. So he gives him just a slight shift without dismantling his world. The trace of ego is kept in order to enjoy God. You can enjoy divine bliss only when you make a distinction between yourself and God, the distinction between the servant and the master. There is also the devotee of the mediocre class. He sees that God dwells in all being as their inner guide, but the inferior devotee says that God exists. He's up there, that is to say, beyond the sky. Everyone laughs. When I saw the cowherd boys of Golika in your performance, I felt like God has become all. He who has seen God knows truly that God alone is the doer. That is, he who does everything. Girish, sir, I know truly that it is God who does everything. Master, I say, O mother, I am the machine and you are the operator. I am inert and you make me conscious. I do as you make me do. I speak as you make me speak. But the ignorant say, I am partly responsible and God is partly responsible. Right? That's kind of where we hang out because we haven't gotten quiet enough inside and haven't gone inside in a serious way yet to where we really do inner discernment in a serious way, a regular way, right? And so we don't see that it is God that makes us speak and that it is God that makes us move. It's God within us, right? Working through inspiration, not through mind, right? Not through mind. But then the worldly person says, well, okay, I'll give it. I can see that God would have something to do with it, and I have something to do with it. Girish, sir, I am not really doing anything. Why should I bother about work at all? Master, no, work is good. When the ground is well cultivated and cleared of stones and pebbles, whatever you plant will grow. But one should work without any personal motive. There are two types of Paramahamsas, two types of knowers, the Jnani and the Premi, all right? The Premi is the lover of God. The Jnani is the knower. The Jnani is self-centered. He feels that it is enough to have knowledge for his own self. The Premi, like Shukadeva, after attaining his own realization, teaches men. Some eat mangoes and wipe off the traces from their mouths, but some share their mangoes with others. Spades and baskets are needed to dig a well. After the digging is over, some throw the spades and baskets into the well, but others put them away for the neighbors to use them. Shukadeva and a few others kept the spades and baskets for the benefit of others. To Girish, you should do the same. Right? God has given you so much. You keep writing these plays. They're inspiring. This play put me in samadhi 3 times in a row. the work you're doing is great. So no longer do it for yourself. No longer see it as your job or your livelihood. Now do it out of inspiration in service to others, Girish. You see, so we've seen how he's teaching Girish. Very gentle little moves in the right direction. No correction, no scolding, no harshness, just general little statements of the truth, showing Girish what's right about him, and then fixing a little bit of a twist that will make it even better. Right? So telling him, yes, that's right. You should do the same. Girish, please bless me, sir. Right? So someone who's being taught properly, that's their response. Please bless me. It's like a salve on a burn. Right? It's like, yes, help me. Thank you. Master, have faith, right? Have faith in the Divine Mother, and you will attain everything. So very good. So what's he doing there? He's telling him, don't put your faith in this body, mind, even if I'm divine. Go to the Mother, right? Go to the Spirit. Go to that which will never leave you, right? Have faith in the Divine Mother, and you will attain everything. So there's a teaching for all of us through faith in the divine, right? Faith in what? In the divine. Faith in love. Faith in grace, so that you can go forward without having to drag your notion of your lower self with you everywhere you go, so that you can be free. Girish, but I'm a sinner. Master, the wretch who constantly harps on sin becomes a sinner. Girish, sir, the very ground where I used to sit would become unholy. Master, how can you say that? Suppose a light is brought into a room that has been dark 1,000 years. Does it illumine the room little by little, or all at once in a flash? Girish, then you have blessed me. Master, if you sincerely believe it, Girish, what more shall I say? I eat and I drink and I chant the name of God. Girish, I have no sincerity. Please give it to me. Master, I? Sages like Narada and Shukadeva could have done that. Girish, I don't see Narada and Shukadeva, but you are here before me. Master, smiling, all right, you have faith. Wow. I think we just witnessed one of the most powerful moments in the universe right there. God and his lover, the lover insisting, I'm impure, I'm unworthy, I can't. And the master not being at all sympathetic to that, saying, what? How can you say that? If you say that, you have to live that, right? This is where I get that idea of these little narratives that we state in the moments all the time. Oh, I can't meditate. If you believe that, then that's where you have to be. You know, die to that idea. Let go of that idea, right? Let go of that idea. And then you go to the mother for blessing, right? Go to the mother for faith. Go to Thakur for faith. Go, right? And then trust. Because all Ramakrishna does here is just say, all right, you have faith. All remained silent. The conversation began again. Right? And so it happened for him right then and there. You see the moment where Girish gets faith, faith in the grace of God. And now you know the moment when that impetus for his sainthood happened, because he dies a saint. All remained silent. The conversation began again. Girish, I have one desire, love of God for its own sake. Master, only the Ishvarakotis have such love. It is not for ordinary men. All sat in silence. The master began to sing in an absent-minded mood, his gaze turned upward. He sang, can everyone have the vision of Shyama? Is Kali's treasure for everyone? Oh, what a pity my foolish mind will not see what is true. Even with all his pennies, rarely does Shiva himself behold the mind penances, not pennies. Even with all his penances, rarely does Shiva himself behold the mind-bewitching sight of Mother Shyama's crimson feet. To him who meditates on her, the riches of heaven are poor indeed. If Shyama casts her glance on him, he swims in eternal bliss. The prince of yogis, the king of gods, meditate on her feet in vain. Yet worthless Kamalakanta yearns for the mother's blessed feet. Girish repeated, yes, yet worthless Kamalakanta yearns for the mother's blessed feet. Master to Girish. You see, in Girish saying that, repeating that verse, that's him assimilating, right? He sees himself as the worthless Kamalakanta, and it wakes that yearning. Yes, the worthless Kamalakanta yearns for the mother's blessed feet. The Master to Girish. One can realize God through intense renunciation, but the soul must be restless for him, as restless as one feels for a breath of air when one's head is pressed under water. A man can see God if he unites in himself the force of these three attractions: the attraction of worldly possessions for the worldly man, the husband's attraction for the chaste wife, and the child's attraction for its mother. If you can unite these three forms of love and give it all to God, then you can see him at once. What a beautiful promise. What a beautiful promise.
So it is child's love for the mother, and which are
Child's, it's the husband's attraction for a chaste wife, the attraction of a worldly man for his possessions, and the attraction of a child for its mother. So the attraction of your intimate relationship, the attraction of the things in the world to you, and the attraction of you and a child for its mother, right? Put those three loves together and give it to God, and you will see him right away. Right? Cry to your mother Shyama with a real cry, O mind, and how can she hold herself from you? Ramakrishna goes on, if a devotee prays to God with real longing, God cannot help revealing himself to him. Right? So if you really long, if this is really what you want, right? If this is really what you want, God cannot help but give himself to you. The other day I told you the meaning of bhakti, of devotion. It is to adore God with body, mind, and words. With body means to serve and worship God with one's hands, go to holy places with one's feet, hear the chanting of the name and glories of God with one's ears, and behold the divine image with one's eyes. With mind means to contemplate and meditate on God constantly and to remember and think of his Leela. With words means to sing hymns to him and to chant his name and his glories. Right? So what a wonderful way to remember here, one wonderful way to think. It's basically engaging our whole body mind, right? Finding a way to use all of our senses to think and honor God. Right? So we look at the flowers, we look at the sunsets, and we think of God. We see the beauty of God, right? We smell the pizza, and we think of God, right? We hear the church bells, and we think of God. Everything allows us to think of God. Everything points at the divine reality, right? That's why, as we were talking earlier, that Ramakrishna would go into samadhi all the time, because he understood that everything in this world points at the beloved. Right? This world is not meant to be a distraction. It's meant to be the pointer. And if you orient yourself that way, you will find God. Right? You will know God. Devotion as described by Narada. Oh, it's time to stop. We'll stop with that thought because that's a good place right there. Let me turn off the recorder.